ReZsaun Lewis is a father, a husband, a mentor, and executive director of the Low Country Youth Services. He also served in the United States military. Now he wants to become the next member of the South Carolina House of Representatives, where he wants to represent the constituents of House District 97. I speak exclusively with him for this edition of Quintin's Close-Ups. And if you haven't already, subscribe to my YouTube channel and like Quintin's Close-Ups on Facebook. ReZsaun Lewis, welcome back to Quintin's Close-Ups.
Thank you so much for having me, man. It's great to be back.
I appreciate it greatly. Obviously, you are the executive director of the Low Country Youth Services. You're a former teacher. You're a community leader. And of course, you served our United States military honorably for so many years. But I understand now that you want to run to become the next state representative for House District 97, which is basically Dorchester County.
Yeah.
Why, ReZsaun Lewis, why District 97? Why now?
Thank you so much for asking. That's a great question. I have, as you mentioned, I do have a background of service. My entire life has been service. Once I graduated from North Charleston High School in 2001, I went off and joined the military, where I served in both domestically and abroad. In Afghanistan, where I served a tour in Camp Asaliya, Qatar, and spent time in both Afghanistan as well as Kuwait. In my domestic, I served here in Columbia at Fort Jackson, as well as in Fort Gordon, Georgia. But in addition to that, when I came home in 2007, I started trying to figure out more ways to serve once I'd left the military. That led me to education, where I taught for 5 years in Dorchester District 2 schools, as well as Berkeley County School District, where I learned to love on and support the needs of the youth of our low country. And then I moved on to, while I was doing that, I moved into more community-based service through the nonprofit sector, working both at the Center for Heirs Property Preservation, as well as with the Low Country Youth Services, where I've been working with youth since 2016, and we serve annually about 240 kids on an annual basis. So my life has always been service. This is just another step in serving my community. One thing that I've seen is that our legislators and our legislation normally doesn't represent the people that serve. It does the people that they serve. It doesn't represent people who grew up like I grew up, in North Charleston, in probably not one of the nicer areas of the city, where, they would come in and they'd come up with laws that would say, okay, cool, we can tear down this basketball court, we can tear down this playground and put up a tennis court. And that doesn't represent the people that live in that community. I want to make sure that our legislators and our legislation represents the people that they're serving. Also, we've seen what's happened in terms of the polarization of politics in our country in the last, few years. I mean, of course, up until this point, there's always been some form of polarization, but extremism is really the word of the day today. Everybody has to run to their corners. I believe that we need to have more of a centered approach in legislation, especially at the State House, where Republicans and Democrats can work together. And you're not isolated, in my eyes, because you're a Republican, or you're not uplifted solely because you're a Democrat. We need to be issue-based voters and not party-based voters. And I want to have that conversation on the trail. So those are all reasons why I decided to run for 97.
What are those centered conversations that you're having right now in House District 97?
Well, one, just the hard work, right? The hard work of not assuming that you can identify somebody's personal characteristics and who they are based on having an R or a D in front of their name. That conversation in and of itself is just a place that it has to start. But we're talking about issues, right? I'll start with one of my key issues, which is education. I believe that most people agree on about 95% of things, and we allow the 5% of things that we disagree on to be the thing that really drives us apart. Education. We all think that our kids should have a good education. I can ask a Republican parent, I can ask a Democratic parent, I can ask an independent parent, I can ask a Libertarian parent, I can ask a Green Party parent, I can ask a Tea Party parent. Do you want your child to have a quality education? You better believe that they do. Now, the question is, if we're going to have quality education, what are we missing in education that would allow us to have that quality education? As a former teacher, I can tell you that it's not better teachers, because the teachers in the state of South Carolina are among the best on the planet. I've taught with them, I've stood side by side with them, and I can tell you that they are amazing. They are doing amazing work. But the truth is that the legislative body has not done what it needs to do, both on the local, state, and federal level, to make sure that these teachers and these administrators have what they need to be successful. In our schools, we have schools sharing personnel in order to make ends meet resource-wise. We have schools that share PE teachers, that share mental health professionals, if they have them at all, that share SROs, that share all of these resources that really should be identified, that should be allocated to one school. Every school should have their own mental health professional that kids can come in and speak to, not one that's spread out over 4 schools where they have to speak to about 80 kids a week, which makes it really hard for them to really fulfill that mission. So that's the thing that I'm passionate about when you're talking about education. Law enforcement, right? We all know that we want safe communities. You ask Democrats, they want safe communities. You ask Republicans, they want safe communities. Now, do we disagree on how to get there and the best ways to do it? Sure. But we can agree that we all want safe communities. I don't think anybody wants to eliminate policing. And I think that's a conversation that we can have about how effective the form of policing is that we currently have. I have a background where I have actually been able to work with the Charleston Police Department to develop youth programming that is building bridges within the community between the law enforcement and that community in a developmental project. A lot of people will tell you that's not possible, and a lot of people will tell you that Democrats don't feel like that's an important initiative. I do. So those are just a couple things that I know that work across party lines. Of course, there are a lot more infrastructure. We're talking about having broadband in areas that are greatly impacted by the fact that they don't have access to broadband, especially in the era where, in the COVID era, we've seen so many jobs move to remote. So that means that economic opportunities are available for people in rural areas that do not currently exist, simply based on having that infrastructure of having that broadband. So I don't want to talk too much, but I want to make sure I just touched on a few of those topics that I was alluding to.
And I got a whole lot of questions for you about those particular issues right now. But let me ask you this. You said this: I am running because I believe in the power of us. What power do you have for this position?
Yes. So the power of us, again, a lot of legislators run based on what they can do for you, right? I'm going to promise you this. The thing that ReZsaun promises is that I'm going to listen to you. That's what I'm promising. I'm going to listen to you, my constituents. When you vote me to District 97 as your next representative, I'm going to be someone who will pick up the phone. I will be someone that's still showing up at your events. I will be somebody that will still be in the communities that we serve. Because we as legislators, once I become a legislator, I'm there to serve you. That's something that I've understood as a community leader. That's something I've understood as a teacher. That's something I've understood when I was a soldier. No matter what I'm doing, I only do it at the service and the will of the people. So with that being the case, the power of us is you have the opportunity as a constituent to tell me how to best serve you. So when I'm talking about the power of us, I'm talking about not just saying, oh, I'm only going to listen to the people who voted for me. I'm only going to listen to the people who donated to my campaign. I'm only going to donate to people, listen to people who support the causes that I believe in. No. We have to have a much broader discussion about what is best for us as Americans, as South Carolinians, as people from the Low Country. What's best going to serve us? And that only happens if we're working together. I can't do that if I hate somebody based on a simple letter. And that's what the power of us is all about.
Where is your power to win this seat, which is particularly a red seat?
Yeah, that's a great question, right? So some people say, and I'll be very frank with you, Quintin, because that's a very personal question for me. When I threw my hat in the ring, when I actually started calling around and telling people I was going to throw my hat in the ring, I was told, listen, this seat has almost pretty much been promised to another person. Just by the way things have been lined up, if we look at the maps, what has happened, we know that the last 2 elections was won by Representative Andy Kimmons, who served honorably as a Republican representative in the state house. But before that, the previous 4 terms were served by Patsy Knight, who was a Democrat. And we know that that's a seat that is winnable by Democrats and Republicans. Now, if you look at what's happened with redistricting, it made it a much redder district, just based on the demographics and the numbers. But what I'm willing to bet on, again, is the power of the people. I believe that there are people that have not been spoken to in District 97 that have not heard their voice. And because they haven't heard their voice, they either voted one way or they didn't vote at all. And I'm trusting in the power of us that if we come out to vote, if we use our power that has been given to us by the Constitution to vote, to make our voices heard, then we can together win this. And then when we together win this, we can provide the resources for District 97 that will allow us to make it the district that it needs to be in the future. Together. My name's on the marquee. I know it. But it's not about me. It's about us. And that's where the power comes from.
Answers do you have to the district's current concerns?
Great question. So, one thing that I know that the people in the district are worrying about is the fact that we're expanding really rapidly. Now, of course, we're not expanding as rapidly as Berkeley County, which I believe is the fastest growing county in the state of South Carolina. But we are growing rapidly. People are moving here from everywhere to join, these great businesses that are coming. You know, the Boeings, as Volvo's out there now. Mercedes Benz, and even the Cummings. Like all of these great corporations that are providing all these job opportunities in the state of South Carolina. We see what's happening infrastructurally, all these job opportunities. People are coming. And as they're coming, we have to make sure that we are growing at the pace of our growth. And when that means growing, that means amending the way of South Carolina to meet that growth. So that's one of the issues that I know that the people of District 97 are interested in is how are we preparing for the adaptation? Just in the city of Somerville, if you drive on Main Street between 3 and 6 p.m., you're gonna be in some kind of traffic because we're looking at, again, a city that was not prepared for the growth that came with it. So that's one thing, preparing for the growth. Secondly, their concerns, again, back to education. People want good schools. South Carolina is the 48th ranked state in South Carolina in terms of education. One thing that I've noticed is that we are at the top at the areas that we should be at the bottom, and we're at the bottom at the areas that we should be at the top. And education is one of those areas. And I come back to the fact that it's not because we don't have dedicated educators. It's because we have not taken care of our educators. We have not given them the resources that they need to be successful, and we've asked them to make miracles out of minuscule resources. And that's something that I know, again, that the people of District 97 care about. So just those are two.
What is the pace of growth in House District 97?
Now, the numbers I do not have specifically, but I think if you just do the eye test, you can definitely see that there are more people on roads. There's traffic in places that there normally wouldn't be traffic. Now, of course, that growth has not expanded. And that's the other part is that growth that we talk about, while in the area where I live, Somerville, you can definitely see that growth. But areas like St. George, Ridgeville's getting the houses, right? Ridgeville's getting the houses. You see these different housing suburban areas popping up left and right in Ridgeville, right? And that's expanding out and out and out. Now, I don't have the numbers on that, but I can tell you that just from the eye test, that tells me that there are more people. Now, think about this fact, right? In District 97, despite this growth that I talk about, we have Somerville High School overcrowded. We have Ashley Ridge, who's people who live in District 97, their kids go to Ashley Ridge, overcrowded, right? Fort Dorchester, which is not in District 97, but it's still DD2, overcrowded, right? Then we have in Colleton County, further up in Dorchester County, DD2, and DD4, we have Woodland High School, also overcrowded. So that's 4 high schools that are all overcrowded. And if you ask, when you look at the numbers, also underperforming. What does that tell you? There's something that matches that overcrowding with the underperforming in schools. When you have a school that should have 15 to 20 students in a school classroom that are sitting with 25 to 30 kids in the classroom, and teachers continually walking away, that exacerbates that problem. So if you want to look at 2 areas to see where that growth is clearly shown, look at the amount of kids in a classroom, look at the amount of kids in a school, and look at the amount of new housing developments that are popping up in these relative areas. So that's what speaks to the expansion to me.
What are the 4 underperforming schools in House 97?
What are the 4 underperforming schools, the most underperforming schools? So again, these are numbers that I want to make sure that before I try to, this is one thing about me. If I don't know something, I'm not just going to pretend like I know to make sure that, to sound intelligent. So I will tell you this. I don't have the numbers on that, but I can tell you as a teacher who's been in those classrooms that, and just seen the demographic, we've seen the testing numbers, that our schools as a state are underperforming. That's something that happens in Dorchester District 2. That's something that happens in Colleton County. That's something that happens in DD4. But it's not limited to Dorchester District 2. It's not limited to District 4. And it's not limited to Colleton County. If you look at Charleston County, same issue. You look at Berkeley County, same issue. So it's an issue that is in 97, but it's not isolated to 97. It's just that I'm running for 97. And because I'm running for 97, I want to make sure I'm speaking to the issues of 97.
Now, how many homes in District 97 have been built at a fairly consistent rate?
How many homes?
Yes, sir.
Okay, I'm sorry, I don't have the numbers on that. I don't want to shoot from anything.
No worries. What is the median house price in House District 97?
The median house price?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I'm sorry, I don't have that number. I apologize.
No worries. Well, let me ask you this. What is the household type in District 97?
So District 97 is mostly rural areas. So a lot of single family homes. You're talking about suburban areas. So housing communities. It's not, of course, not an inner city. So if you're not from the Low Country, then you're looking at an area that's mostly rural. If you're looking at Dorchester County, so if you look at 97, Dorchester County is really broken down to 97. It's the top of Somerville, so not all of Somerville, but just a part of Somerville, the back end of Somerville, which is really the suburban part of Somerville. Jedburgh Way out to St. George. That area includes like the Dorchester out to St. George's, which is a small town, but again, very rural. Moving out south, where you're looking at Ridgeville, which used to be a lot more rural than it is, but it's becoming more suburban. Moving out to like the Round O area, which is very, very suburban. Cottageville, small town. So most of it, the vast majority of it, the largest percentage of it is rural areas. And so in terms of campaigning, what that means is I can't rely on a lot of things that a lot of people could do in a larger city, right? We can go out to, so going out to identify those mom and pop shops out in those areas and speaking to people about these issues that they specifically care about, finding out what are the issues, that are impacting you on a day-to-day basis that you want to hear legislators talking about. How are people missing you? Why are you not voting? How can I get you to the polls? So those are all things that, that, like I said, I may not have those numbers specifically that you're asking about, but I definitely am working to develop a basis of knowledge in those things. So thank you.
No worries at all. Okay. Where have you identified those mom and pop shops in House District 97?
Mm-hmm. So we're looking definitely at St. George. St. George, there's a couple areas that we're looking to hit. We're building our event plan. And really, I'm telling you, we're going to blitzkrieg the entire District 97 in terms of being everywhere. Of course, the churches, we'll be at churches in Cottageville, St. George, Dorchester, Ridgeville, even Walterboro. On February 26th, I'll be at the Big Blue Bash that they're having in Walterboro. I believe it's a museum. It's a market. It's a market in a museum. I'll be there. We're working on something in Give Hands where we can meet constituents and talk to them about their issues. And in Somerville, we're also developing things. So there are mom and pop shops. If you have a mom and pop shop and you'd like for me to come out and talk to your constituents, talk to people that serve that are in your community, I would love to come out. But there's really no place that we're not trying to hit in terms of allowing them to hear the message and find what we're trying to do in developing that power of us through the community.
What is that message, ReZsaun?
The message is that together we can do this. That we need a voice that's willing to listen. Like there are people who have more what I could call institutional knowledge. And I guess in order to really explain what I mean in this, I'll go back to sort of my entry to the nonprofit sector. Right? When I came into the nonprofit sector, I was a teacher. Right? I was a teacher who had a passion for working with kids. And because I was a teacher that had a passion for working with kids, I wanted to work in the nonprofit sector. I was not yet a nonprofit leader. Right? I didn't know at the time, I didn't know everything that it took about running an organization. But I knew that if I got involved and started to educate myself about that process, I would learn with the people that I served. And as I learned from the people that I served and I learned with the people that I served, I became an even better leader because I learned with them. I didn't place myself above them based on my knowledge. I was developing with them. And as I was developing with them, I became a better advocate for their needs. That's why Low Country Youth Services has gone from serving roughly 50 kids a year to serving 240 kids a year. Because we've grown, we've talked to the people, we've talked to the parents, we've talked to the community leaders, we've talked to the municipalities and said, if we had a program that was to serve what you needed, what would that look like? And we built that house based on the will of the people, as opposed to me walking in and saying, I'm going to build this house based on what I want for you. What I want doesn't matter. What ReZsaun Lewis wants doesn't matter. What you, person sitting at home watching this, is what matters. So if you are a person who is interested in finding out about how, what I'm going to be doing, I'm going to be doing what you want me to do. And that means I'm going to be bringing your issues to the table at the State House in Columbia. And that's going to look differently depending on what the issues are of the day. We know that there are certain issues that are currently in the State House that are being bannered about. We're talking about anti-hate crime legislation, or we're talking about CRT legislation, or we're talking about the medical marijuana bills that are up there right now. We're talking about redistricting, which has already been passed, but we see in the states of, I believe, Tennessee and in North Carolina have already been overturned by the Supreme Courts. When we're looking at these kinds of things, we need people at the State House who understand what people on the ground level are thinking and not just walking in with our own suppositions based on what the party told us we should say.
What particular bills would you co-sponsor right now in the State House?
So co-sponsor. So in terms of, I would say support, right? Because co-sponsor is like before it actually gets to the place where like they're debating it. So I want to make sure the ones that I would definitely pass the Clementa-Pinckney Act. That bill needs to be passed. Those of us from Charleston, I remember June 17th when the Emanuel 9 shooting massacre happened at the hands of the white supremacist Dylan Roof. I remember when that happened. I remember mourning that night. I was at a group. I was actually recording with my gospel group at the time, and we stopped what we were doing because there was a shooting at the Emanuel AME Church. And though I'm from Charleston, I didn't know the Emanuel AME Church. But once I understood what it stood for and why that person chose that church, when it was rooted in hatred, it's rooted in bigotry, it's rooted in so many things that have held our country back for hundreds of years. And since we were Jim Crow, and since Jim Crow has still continued to hold us back. We're one of 2 states in the union that does not have anti-hate crime legislation. So I would definitely push in the name of Reverend Clementa Pinckney. I would support that. I would support. This is of course a Senate bill; it's not on the House side yet. But I would support legislation for the medical marijuana bill. I think that the decriminalization of marijuana needs to happen. Basically, one, because people use marijuana as a way to target unfairly Black and brown communities. We've seen what mass incarceration has happened in our state and beyond. Again, this is an issue that's a South Carolina issue, but it's also a national issue that we have to look at. And medical and marijuana, the criminalization of marijuana is one of those issues that continues to pervade that issue on a larger scale, especially considering the 19 states have already approved it. We don't know any negative side effects to marijuana, and I think that it's been seen that it's something that also could be a great revenue generator for a state. So I definitely would sponsor or co-sponsor a bill that would decriminalize marijuana as well.
Now, how much money, if it were to pass and generate, what would that be? How much would that be for your district, and how much would you want that as far as using that towards other projects in South Carolina?
Great question. So I don't have the numbers, but I do know that in Colorado,
Yes,
it's been in the B's,
okay.
Like in the B's, the amount of money they've raised. When I say B's, I mean billions, that they've been able to raise for their state just in legalizing marijuana. Imagine the amount of people that travel to Colorado, travel to California, travel to these states just to take part in their legalized marijuana, to go into a dispensary and buy marijuana. It also regulates it, so you can make sure that people are not doing things that are unsavory to marijuana, which could lead to further addiction or lead to death based on by using those types of drugs when they're laced with other things because of no regulation. But the money that we raise, these billions, we can put towards making sure that there's better roads, making sure we have broadband, making sure that our schools have adequate resources, making sure that we have teacher pay that's competitive with the states that are top in our country. Let's look at starting teacher pay in the state of South Carolina. In the state of South Carolina, teacher pay right now starts at $35,000 a year if you're coming straight out of high school with a bachelor's degree, right? Governor McMaster, in his State of the State address, said with the infrastructure money that's coming through, thanks to the infrastructure plan that President Biden and the Democrats passed without a lot of Republican support, that money coming to the state of South Carolina, and they're raising teacher pay based on the governor's executive plan from $35,000 to $38,000 starting. Now, let's look at where the national average is for starting teachers. It's $43,000 a year starting coming out of college. So even with the raise that they're giving teachers of $3,000, we're still not competitive with the top states. When you look at Georgia, their starting pay is $44,000. In North Carolina, it's $41,000. So when you're looking at these issues and you're saying, where are the areas that something like legalizing marijuana, Just like when we created the lottery, we created the lottery, which brought an influx of money for the state of South Carolina and helped to benefit education. These are things that we can do that will not allow us to tighten our bootstraps, but to bring more revenue and generate more opportunities for the people of the state of South Carolina, which gives us better schools, better roads, better infrastructure, a better community, and a better life.
Since you brought that to my attention, let me go straight into it. What is the retention rate for teachers right now in District 97?
In 97, I can't tell you specifically, but I can tell you in the state of South Carolina is low. When I left education in 2019, I think the number that they were looking at was that 1,400 teachers were walking away from the classroom annually. That was before COVID. That was before remote teaching. That was before before teachers had to teach in the classroom and on the screen. Right. So I can only imagine that those numbers have been exacerbated by what's happened with COVID. I can only imagine. And this is before I even say the year that 2019 was the year of the Red for Ed, the big Red for Ed push, where we put 10,000 teachers on the State House lawn. This was before that, and since then situations have not improved; they've gotten worse. And so, do I have the specific numbers of how many teachers walked away? No, but do I know a lot of teachers that have walked away? Yes, a lot of the teachers that I've taught with have walked away from education. And it's not because they don't love kids. I want to make sure I reiterate that point. When teachers walk away from education, it's not because they don't love kids. It's because they're burnt out by the lack of opportunity for them. They should not have to work a full-time job and then leave and go work another job to make ends meet. That's a problem. And this is a problem that I've heard from teachers, so I can speak to it. This is a problem that I've experienced as a teacher, so I can speak to it. Maybe there's some issues that I can't speak to yet because I haven't been able to speak to those people yet. But as I hit the ground and I'm campaigning, I'm getting to learn more about these communities and these people and looking at these numbers and being able to spout them out in a much better fashion. I'll be able to speak to that more significantly as well.
Now, okay, what strategies do you have to retain qualified teachers in schools that have those high risk proportions of at-risk students?
Yeah. So, great question. So, one, teachers, back to my point about mental health, right? We all talking about mental health. Mental health is the word of the day. Protect your mental health, protect your peace, protect your space, whatever that looks like. One, I believe that every single school should have its own mental health counselor, not a guidance counselor, because people misconstrue the two. A guidance counselor's job is not to help kids deal with mental health issues. Guidance counselors are not mental health professionals. The mental health professionals that are in the schools are put there by the Department of Mental Health, which means that we need to provide more resources to the Department of Mental Health to disperse these mental health professionals to schools in the state of South Carolina in District 97. That's one thing, which also means we need to give more funding to the Department of Mental Health, going back to something like the legalization of marijuana, which can provide opportunities to provide that money. Also, those mental health professionals are grossly underpaid. This is a conversation that I was actually having with a young lady the other night, talking about how little resources the mental health counselors that go into schools get. So they don't want to do those because you're underpaid as a teacher, you're underpaid as a mental health counselor, but I digress, right? So that's the first thing. Secondly, I would make sure that we were able to reduce class sizes to 15 to 20 students. That's going to require certain things. That requires building more schools, right? We're going to need more schools. We're going to need more teachers in the schools. So we need to have more teachers in the schools. We need to provide more money to the teachers. So raising teacher pay as well as administrator pay. So those are just a few things that I believe that will help in all schools, including schools that have a high percentage of at-risk students.
Okay, well, where would you get this funding from for these mental health counselors?
Yes. So again, just looking at we were looking at the state budget from last year. My team was actually last week, and what we identified was that we got a lot of pork in the budget in a state that's run by a Republican governor, Republican Senate, Republican House. Majority, all three. We know that to be factual, right? With that being the case, and it has been that way for quite some time. Republican controlled, right? Now, we know Republicans to be fiscal conservatives, right? Conservatives is the word. And so if you're conservative, then you should be tightening your belt. And there are certain areas that we're spending money that we could pull money from to I'll use an example, and it's probably not going to be one of the most popular things, but look at the amount of money that we spend on athletics in the state of South Carolina. I'm a sports fan. I love sports. I love sports. But if you're asking me if we need a new practice facility at the largest school in the state, or we can use some of that money to make sure that we're providing better teacher pay, I'm picking teacher pay. If you're asking me if we can build a new stadium or an addition to the stadium to bring in an additional 10,000 students to these games, or additional 10,000 fans to this game, or we can give more money to the Department of Mental Health or the Department of Juvenile Justice or OJJDP or all these organizations that are working to make sure that our communities are safe and that our schools are resourced and that our infrastructure is sound, I'm willing to do that. Now, again, that's not the target sports because I love sports. My daughter's a student at Clemson, and we love going to Clemson football games. But again, if I had a choice, I'm going to choose education. I'm going to choose mental health. I'm going to choose infrastructure. I'm going to choose healthcare access. These are areas that we can redirect if we're strategic. Again, just looking at it, because there are people in the State House who specialize in doing just that, looking at the budget and identifying places where we can redirect those resources. So that's what I would do day one, is look at the areas that we do have that pork and moving it to those areas that are need.
What pork projects in House District 97 would you eliminate?
What pork projects in District 97 would I include? So I actually haven't looked at the budget for District 97, so I don't want to make a statement on that one.
Okay. Going to this smaller, or obviously reducing class sizes, I should say, would smaller classes would raise student achievement by what percentage?
Numbers wise, I don't know. I haven't looked at the research which says, the numbers of how the smaller class size improves achievement. What I can tell you is, as a teacher who's taught in a classroom with 15 students and is taught in a classroom with 30 students, I can tell you there's a vast difference of achievement when you talk about differentiated instruction. So differentiated instruction, for those who aren't education, don't have a background in education, the ability to work with a student on their level, right? If I have 15 students, it's much easier to reach each child on their level. If I have 30 students, it's much harder to reach every child on their level. So I want you to think about in your workplace, if you are learning a brand new job, right? You're learning a brand new job, and you had a supervisor that had 200 people that were reported to them, as opposed to having 10 or having 20. Do you think that person would be a better supervisor or a worse supervisor based on having those numbers? So I want to make sure I try to speak in more common sense so that people can really identify. I don't have the specific numbers, but I can tell you that the level of achievement. And I also say this: look at the schools in the state. Look at Lexington County, which does a great job in terms of educating their kids. I think they're the top district in the county. There was actually a state hearing where the governor and the people at the State House were lauding the approach of Lexington County. And I saw a tweet where they said they were talking to a kid that was there, and they said, they keep bringing up Lexington County. Why don't they just turn every county in the state into Lexington County? Why don't they just do everything that they do in Lexington County in every place in the state? And it's because the education is largely driven by what zip code you live in. And that's an issue that we got to talk about one of these days. But,
Now, let me ask you, how much does it cost, Mr. Lewis, to actually reduce the class size?
How much does it cost? I don't know. I don't know that number. As a teacher, they don't really roll out the budget for us and tell us, what it's going to cost, what it would cost us annually. And as a legislator, that's something that I'm hoping to find out these numbers to bolster the points that I'm trying to make about the importance of it. I think a lot of times what happens, and again, this really goes back to my newness in politics. This is my first run for anything in terms of elected office. I actually told somebody the other day, I've never even run for class president. I've never run for anything. So I'm not a trained politician in that regard. So I don't have those numbers in terms of how much it would cost. But I can tell you that the benefits outweigh any costs that would come with it. There's no number that you can tell me that would be too much that would if you're telling me that movement, that activity, that action would increase teacher retention, increase student performance, would increase the ability for us to perform on a national level. Let's talk about the fact that Boeing came to the state of South Carolina and could not find employees from the state of South Carolina and had to bring people from other states to work at their facility. That's a direct result of what I'm talking about in terms of class size. Do you think that Boeing would find it as an important thing that we have 15 students in a class as opposed to 30 students in a class? Yes, I'm pretty sure they would. So that's something that I definitely think that as we're looking at, why this is important, because some people may say, well, he doesn't have the numbers, so clearly that's not true. Ask a teacher. Ask a teacher. That teacher may not have the numbers to tell you how much it's going to cost, but that teacher would definitely tell you if I had less students, I could do a much better job of performing on these standardized tests, which they use to judge me as a teacher. They don't judge me based on how many, lives I save. They don't judge me based on how many, hugs I give. They don't judge me on how many children who have terrible, lives at home, who come to me and I give them their one, sense of happiness and sunshine. They don't judge them based on that. They judge them based on these state numbers. And if we're going to judge them based on the state numbers, we should give them the resources that are required for them to perform better on these state numbers. And that requires smaller class sizes.
Okay, well, where is the physical equity here in the state for that?
I'm sorry, could you re-ask that? Could you ask that question in a different way? I'm not sure.
Oh, no worries. Where is the physical equity in the state for reducing class size?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure because I'm not sure, and I apologize because the physical equity of the classroom, I'm not sure what that means, and I apologize. I don't know what that means.
Oh, no worries. Let me ask you this. This is what I want to ask you. What the state of South Carolina fund individualized professional growth for teachers?
I'm in a nonprofit cohort fellowship between the state of North Carolina and South Carolina, and I'm getting somewhere. But we were having a discussion yesterday about a study that came out about serving leaders of color in the nonprofit sector, and one of the findings in it was that nonprofit leaders of color don't need more training; they need more resources. I would say the same thing about teachers. Teachers don't need more training. Teachers are very trained. Teachers are, if you look at the amount of training that teachers get as opposed to people in other professions, I can almost promise you, probably outside of lawyers and doctors, teachers have the most annual training of any profession that there is. Teachers don't need more training. They need more resources. They need higher pay. They need better benefits. They need smaller class sizes. They need support in the classrooms. That's what teachers need. So I would not support a proposal that said we're going to give teachers more training. Teachers don't need more training. They need more support.
And with reducing class size, Mr. Lewis, how small is too small, and for how long?
How small is too small? I think too small is like if you have a classroom with 4 students in it, that's a really bad thing. That's probably not great, right? Because one thing about the classroom that you get is that community, that community that you build within the community, that network. Children learn how to deal with other people. Teachers do know how to manage classrooms. Teachers have pedagogical backgrounds, and they understand how to teach with classrooms full of students. What I would say, 15 is a great number.
Okay.
15 to 20 is a great number. I would dare say that most teachers, if you told them, I believe in the state of South Carolina, you're not supposed to have classrooms any higher than 25 in the state of South Carolina, though a lot go over it. I can tell you, I've personally had classrooms with 26, 27, 28, 29, 30 students in it because our schools are overcrowded. So I would say 15 is a good number. I wouldn't go any lower than 15.
Now, I know, obviously, you said that you're also running because you want to make it so that small business owner can maintain their life's work, but while paying their employee a livable wage. Well, then let me ask you: how many of those small businesses provide employer-funded insurance for their employees?
Great question. So I don't know the percentage on that, but what I would say is employer-funded insurance is a great thing, especially when you're considering the cost of insurance in the state of South Carolina and in the nation. I know with the Affordable Care Act, they're doing things to try to drive down the cost of insurance. I think that's a great resource. If if we're talking, so if you're talking total employee compensation, I think that's something that can be considered. So if you're talking an employee makes $10 an hour, but their employee covers insurance, that could be factored in the amount of that amount that an employee makes. So if you're looking at total compensation, I think that's something that can be considered. I think when we're talking about a livable wage, though, we have to look around the nation to see what states that are at the same population level, at the same cost of living level as the state of South Carolina. What are they paying their employees, and are we competitive there? Because we do want to make sure that we are retaining our employee base. And that people, we're talking about the great migration of the last, a year, 2 years, where people are walking away from their day-to-day jobs and starting businesses. They're doing these things because they're not feeling appreciated. That comes back to not making enough money. So I think if you factor in employee insurance, I think that's a great way to identify where the shortcomings are. But I can tell you that a lot of places that are paying their employees minimum wage are not providing that health insurance. So I guess on a case by case basis you can look at it, but I think the state needs to establish its own minimum wage. Right now, the state does not have a minimum wage, and because we don't have a minimum wage, we go with the federal minimum wage, and we are at the beck and call of the federal minimum wage. The state needs to decide on a minimum wage that is commensurate with what is competitive across the country, so that we can be competitive to keeping our best and brightest employees right here in the state of South Carolina.
What competitive minimum wage is ideal for South Carolina?
The fight for 15 is a big call to action. I have reservations about certain things because, as the arguments were made, if you raise minimum wage to $15, then inflation's just going to increase, and then you'll be paying, $20 for a Snickers bar. I understand that argument. I understand that conversation. I think if we're intentional, and we really do the research, we can actually find a good number that works for everybody. Not for everybody, but at least allows people to have a cost of living that doesn't require you to have to decide between paying your light bill and buying groceries. I think that's something that we can do. I believe, $15 is a good number, but I think $15 is a good number if we can also make sure that we can limit inflation.
Where exactly in House District 97 do you create, attract, and actually retain jobs?
So great question. So we are largely a manufacturing. We're manufacturing and rural. So because we're rural, there's a lot of privatized farming and stuff like that. But we are a manufacturing district for the most part. A lot of our people who work in District 97 are working manufacturing jobs at the local factory that are popping up and are increasing to pop up, which I'm excited about. But what I would like to see is small businesses thrive in District 97. I'll use St. George as an example. St. George once had a thriving downtown area. If you drive down there, you can see the remnants of downtown Somerville. Not downtown Somerville, I'm sorry. Downtown St. George. But if you look, in fact, that was a Freudian slip. But if you look at what's happened in downtown Somerville, that can happen in St. George. That's absolutely possible, where St. George can get that infrastructural improvement that will allow them to bring small businesses back and bolster that local economy, which will allow them to put more money into the schools. Again, more money into the schools, more money into infrastructure, more money into those resources, building that tax base. But so we're largely manufacturing, but I would like to see an increased effort in bringing back those small businesses. And just food deserts. That's another thing, right? There are lots of areas in District 97 that don't have access to a grocery store. You have to drive pretty far to get to an actual grocery store to get fresh fruits and vegetables. So you see, no shade to Dollar General or Family Dollars, but you see those types of stores popping up in these smaller areas. What we need are locally run grocery stores that will provide, fresh fruit, fresh vegetables to these people, and they get, farmers markets popping up that people can buy these fresh fruits and fresh vegetables. That would make sure that they can maintain healthy living as well.
Now, what is the district's current tax base?
By number?
Oh,
Are you asking by number or just?
oh yeah. What is the current tax base in the District 97? I'm sorry, there was a little delay there.
Oh, no problem, no problem. So the tax base. So again, our most people who live in District 97 don't work in District 97. If you are, in a manufacturing, if you look at, again, Boeing, which is in Charleston County, I don't know the district that it falls in. Mercedes-Benz, outside of district. Volvo, slightly outside of district, but it touches district. So our tax base comes from individuals' homes. There's not a lot of corporate tax that's going into our district right now, just because we don't have, a lot of those facilities that will provide that tax base. So it's mostly the citizens. But again, if we bolster that small business community, that has an opportunity to bolster our tax base there as well.
Now, and I know you have to run, and I have to run too. But let me ask
Yes,
you:
sir.
should South Carolina make utility, obviously makes utility a part of, broadband? Well, excuse me. Should broadband be a part of the South Carolina's utility? I should say.
Yes. Yes. I think that in order to have certain structures, you got to pay for structures. You have your light bill, you have your water bill. I don't see anything. I mean, you already pay an internet bill, whether you're paying it to Spectrum or you're paying it to, Comcast or whoever you're paying it to. You have to pay it. I think it should be a utility. We're no longer in an age where broadband can be luxury. It's not a luxury anymore. It's a necessity. Just based on what we've seen in the last couple of years, with, again, the move of so many jobs to remote. I mean, my job, I used to go into work every day. Now I work from home most days. If I lived in an area that didn't have broadband, that would be impossible for me to do. Now, also think about the amount of people that are working that would love to work but can't leave their homes. This would open up doors for them to be able to get jobs. Also, education, right? Let's look at what happened in school. Kids are being forced, when we have a COVID outbreak. My daughter came home. She had a contact trace a few weeks ago. She had to stay home for a week, right? If we lived in an area with no broadband, my daughter would be cut out of school for that week. Thankfully, because we have an area with broadband, she was still able to participate in her classes. These are all issues that are supported directly by broadband access and broadband support. So I want to make sure that I would love to that question. I would love to see it become a utility, something that is not considered to be a luxury, something that is not considered that needs to be supported by local, state, and federal government. I think it's something that needs to be there, and it's something that if something that there's a cost attached to, we already have to pay for it anyway. So make it a utility and make it affordable, make it accessible and affordable for everybody.
And one last question, Mr. Lewis: where should fiber lines be placed in House District 97?
Now, I am not an expert on fiber lines. I wish I was. I wish I would have had that one. But I think considering the rural areas, we will need to make sure that we're considering people's property rights. And so you want to make sure that you're looking at the lines of communities that are being laid down right now. Like you look at Nexton, when they built Nexton, they built fiber lines right underneath it. So we can't, pick up people's homes and drive, and build them underneath it. I think we should just, if we're intentional, we look at the current maps where the spaces are that are community, that are owned by the state, that are community property, that we can run lines there that would still have access to those communities. And as we're laying down new communities, also being intentional about making sure that we're laying down fiber lines there as well, because there's a lot of growth and a lot of increased new communities. So when we're building these communities, let's put the fiber lines down while we're building them. I think that's a great idea.
And I hope to get you back on Quintin's close-ups here in May so we can talk some more, because I want some more. I want to ask you some more follow-up questions than I couldn't do in this hour. But ReZsaun Lewis, thank you for your time. And again, welcome back to Quintin's close-ups.
Yeah, can I just say one thing before I close?
Yes, sir.
I just want to again just one thank you, Quintin, for you've been doing this for a while, and I've been on your show. This is my second time on your show, and I've always told you how much I admire the work that you do here, providing a platform for people to hear from candidates like myself and people in the community like I was before I was a candidate for office. I know that a lot of the questions that quite a few of the questions that were asked, I didn't have the specifics on today. And I understand how someone may look at that and say, that means this person's unprepared for office. I would say the opposite. I would say that shows, knowing me, I'm the type of person that's going to go back to the drawing board and say, hey, there are some certain things that I need to understand, right? And what am I going to do? The thing that I promised you that I do in the very beginning of this call. I'm going to go to my team. I'm going to go to the people of District 97. I'm going to go to my respected advisors, and I'm going to say, hey, how do we bone up on these issues? How do we identify those numbers that are going to be important to the people who are voters on May 17th? And when you speak to me again before May, Quintin, I will definitely have some more of those numbers that you're looking for, because those numbers are important. But I don't want to get bogged down in the numbers.
Right.
I want to get bogged down in the fact that you, the people, deserve somebody who's going to represent you. And I believe that by speaking to you and hearing your concerns and hearing your heart, I can be the person that you need me to be in the State House. So on May 17th, I hope you come out in a special election in District 97 and cast your vote for ReZsaun Lewis. I'm a man who's shown I have commitment, I have character, and I serve my community my entire life. So thank you again, Quintin. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Appreciate it greatly.